It's an international body trying to build peace through education and the preservation of culture. But the US says UNESCO is failing, and it's now walking away from the organisation.
Fortunately, this venue has become politicized, undermining the work of UNESCO across its mandate. It's become a venue for anti-Israel bias, and unfortunately, we are taking the decision to withdraw from UNESCO at this time.
This isn't the first time the Americans have withdrawn. In 1984, President Ronald Reagan pulled the US out, accusing the UN body of being corrupt and having an ideological tilt towards what was the Soviet Union. It didn't join again until 2002, under President George W. Bush. Then in 2011, the US cut more than $80 million a year in funding to UNESCO after it granted Palestine full membership. The US now owes UNESCO more than $500 million.
That amount in arrears is essentially unsustainable.
While the US will be out of UNESCO by the end of the year, it says it will remain what's called a permanent non-member observer state.
Well, I express my deep regret. I think we need everybody on board, and particularly, of course, the United States, who are our founding member and one of our most important supporters in all of this.
The US isn't the only member UNESCO lost last week. Israel also announced its withdrawal, and the timing was apparently coincidental. Israel has been increasingly scathing of what it sees as UNESCO's support for Palestine. Last month, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the UN General Assembly the body was promoting fake history. Last year, Israel recalled its ambassador to UNESCO. It was upset by Arab governments securing support for a resolution that denounced Israel's policies around religious sites in occupied East Jerusalem and the West Bank. And in July, UNESCO declared the Old City in Hebron in the occupied West Bank a Palestinian World Heritage Site, further angering Israel and its American ally.
אונסקו הפך לבמה להחלטות הזויות, אנטי-ישראליות, אנטישמיות למעשה. אנחנו מקווים שהארגון ישנה את דרכו, אבל איננו תולים תקוות בכך.
Is the criticism being thrown at UNESCO fair, or is it doing exactly what it was created to do? And now that it's without the support of its most powerful member, how much peace will it be able to promote? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
I asked UNESCO's Director of Communications, Vincent Deforny, to respond to criticism of the organization.
We received last week on Thursday, we received a notification that the US would withdraw from the UNESCO at the end of 2018. And of course, this is a very disappointing, let's say, situation. We regret, as an international organization where we have 195 member states, we regret that one of the founding members is leaving the organization. It's it's a pity for multilateralism. It's a pity also for the universality of this organization, which has now been working for more than 70 years, trying to address very complex and worldwide issues in the field of education, science, culture, and freedom of expression. This is something which has already occurred. Very unfortunately, the US already withdrew in 1984. They came back in 2002. Some other member states also left. For example, South Africa, in the time of apartheid, they left UNESCO when there were some criticisms against the attitude of UNESCO towards the apartheid. And then, of course, they came back when the time was much better and when the South African government was much more inclined to work with UNESCO on these issues. So we really regret the decision of the State Department of the United States. We welcome all the other member states also to continue and strengthen the work of UNESCO. This is what it is important, and we believe that it is extremely important to maintain a strong international organization working for international cooperation in these areas for building peace in the minds of men and women.
Well, joining me now is UNESCO critic Jason Epstein. He's the president of public policy consulting firm Southfive Strategies in Washington, D.C. Jason, good to have you on the program. So UNESCO says they don't have an anti-Israel bias. Tell me, what's your problem with them?
That's flat out incorrect. Thank you for having me, by the way. UNESCO has a rich history of anti-Israel bias. Just between 2009 and 2014, there were 46 resolutions targeting Israel, 46 measures, 1 on Syria, 0 for the regime in Tehran, 0 for the regime in Pyongyang, 0 for anyone else for that matter. I think the record speaks for itself, and it's very unfortunate because UNESCO does do some very good work around the globe.
Yeah, so when we look at that very good work, brands and protects the world's most precious places, teaches poor kids to read, gives water access to the downtrodden, and all of that. Well, with all of that in mind, wasn't it maybe a better idea for the United States and Israel to work with UNESCO to criticize them within the system rather than to pull out?
Well, you bring up a very good point, Imran. Thank you. It's important to note that there is no doubt in the United States, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, whether you're a left-winger, a centrist, or a right-winger, that UNESCO has failed on the issue of combating hate vis-a-vis a single member state named Israel. The question that we're having today is, what is the best way to try to effectuate change? And based on your initial question, if there is this denial going on that there is a bias, we've got a problem. And I think the Trump administration, in doing what the Reagan administration announced in 1983, announcing an intention to withdraw from the organization, but to maintain observer status, demonstrates that the United States will look elsewhere to promote its values, its important values overseas.
Do you feel as if it's the right price to pay for all those good projects around the world losing funding when it comes to the U.S. leaving?
Well, as you know, the U.S. suspended funding in 2011. And that was under the Obama administration. I know that there is a tendency to put this on the Trump White House, and it is important to note that the concern was raised has been raised in a bipartisan manner in 2011, and that President Obama's permanent representative to UNESCO in Geneva was very critical,
Certainly.
for example, of the decision to honor Che Guevara, and also the numerous anti-Israel resolutions. So again, I think it's
Totally.
important. It's important to point that out.
Yeah. And Obama did this. He cut funding in 2011 because of the PA getting full membership, right? But there was always this hope that the money would come back and that relations with the United States would get better. By pulling out, let me rephrase, there's a cementing of the fact that US money, which is deemed crucial by UNESCO, is not going to come. And if it's not coming back, it means all those nice projects, which you admitted to a couple minutes ago, are not going to get the funding that they possibly deserve. Is that the right price to pay for what you call an anti-Israel bias?
Well, I think this is about negotiation. And if the new Director General, Madame Azoulay, is able to take control, is able to exercise effective control over her governing board, no small task, I admit, then I think that we may see a different course charted.
Yeah.
In the meantime, the United States will continue to fund efforts. As you know, America is a generous country, and Americans are perhaps the most generous people on earth, and they will continue to fund important initiatives around the globe that promote the similar efforts to what UNESCO undertakes.
Yeah, let's have a little listen to what the new Director General, Audrey Azoulay, had to say very recently.
The first thing I will do is work to restore its credibility, restore the faith of its members and its efficiency, so it can act on the challenges facing our world. because it is the only organization that can.
So in a way, I mean, by her saying, I want to restore credibility, restore the faith of its members, and so on, maybe there's an admission of some guilt, or that they might not have done things perfectly right along the way. Let me ask you then, Jason, what can she do in the short term that would convince someone like you that the US and Israel should rejoin the organization?
Well, I think we can hope that there will be a termination of the flood of anti-Israel resolutions. Just one this spring, which had to do with pretty much effectively denying the Jewish connection to Jerusalem, also the Christian connection to Jerusalem. So I think the first thing that she should do is to ensure that there is a new sheriff in town and that the business of UNESCO is promoting collaboration, not hate, not division, not conflict. And if she charts that path, then I think over the next 18 months, you know, the decision to withdraw becomes effective at the end of next year. I think that the White House, the administration, will look at this very closely and obviously will want to work with a director who has that power.
What if I told you
that,
certainly, what if I told you that maybe this has less to do with UNESCO and an anti-Israel bias, or even anti-Semitism, if some have called it, and more to do maybe with Donald Trump just wanting to exit as many international organizations as possible because he doesn't want to get involved?
Well, President, obviously there's concern that's being expressed from all quarters about what are the intentions of this administration. But I can assure you that had Marco Rubio been elected president, had Ted Cruz been elected president, had I will even go so far as to say Jeb Bush been elected president of the United States, this decision would have still taken place. This is not about Donald Trump. The negotiating tactics may be very different. He's certainly a disruptor in that regard. The rhetoric may have been very different. But I assure you that had another Republican been elected president, this decision ultimately would have been the same.
I wonder what you think about what the scientists have said. They try not to have a dog in the political fight, particularly when it comes to Israel and the Palestinian territories, whether it's an occupation or not, and so on. There are those who wade into it. These scientists have not and do not. But Marie-Cécile Navas saying, by leaving UNESCO, Trump confirms his contempt for science and the world. This is a French scientist. We have Rush Holt, the CEO of AAAS, which publishes Science Insider, saying the continued retrenchment of the US administration from active participation in international diplomacy efforts and dialogue is deeply concerning to the scientific community. When you hear that, do they have a case at all?
I think time will tell, and I think that that scientists are most effective when they stick to their profession and the work that they do. I understand that the funding is important, but like I mentioned before, there are plenty of other charitable organizations. There are many other agencies that are conducting this very important work. Look, there are people who have done some great work in many different fields, but if there is a scandal, we don't sweep it under the rug just because of that great work. These scandals and these problems need to be confronted. And anti-Semitism and obsession with a single member state, a democracy where whether people are Jewish or they are Christian or Muslim, they have equal rights as Israeli citizens. That needs to be confronted, not swept aside saying, well, we do some very good work in other areas.
You said anti-Semitism, and this is interesting to me because I guess I'm asking you if an anti-Israel bias necessarily means anti-Semitism as well, because there are those who called the UNESCO designation of the old city of Hebron in the West Bank, which is disputed, Hebron in the West Bank is occupied under international law. It's disputed, including its Tomb of the Patriarchs, as a Palestinian World Heritage Site. So there can be an argument to be made that UNESCO took the side of the Palestinians. But why would you say it's anti-Semitic as well? Tell me why.
Well, look, criticism of Israel is not in and of itself anti-Semitic. Criticism of the idea that Israel has sovereignty over Eastern Jerusalem is not anti-Semitic. Denying or effectively denying a Jewish presence in Jerusalem that goes back 3,000 years is, I don't know what else to call it. It is either willful ignorance, but I would prefer saying that it is an anti-Semitic thought, yes.
Okay. Jason Epstein, good to talk to you on the Newsmakers. Thanks so much for joining us.